Good afternoon, everybody. And India BioStreams, webinars by India Bioscience, is pleased to welcome you to another online webinar on the series called Crafting Your Career. And as you all know, this series aims to address the various aspects concerning career development for science graduates and science professionals, in fact, across the spectrum. Our second session today will be on researching career paths, building skills. And we are also joined by two accomplished guest speakers today from the industry who will share their career journeys with you. Okay, so we see attendees raising your hands. So just hold on a little bit until I give a few housekeeping instructions. Okay, so before we get started, I would like to quickly acknowledge the India Bioscience team behind the scenes. I am Lakshmi. I'll be your host this afternoon. Manjula has been instrumental in the outreach and is probably the reason why you're here. We also have Shreya and Smita, who along with me will be presenting some sections today. And we're also joined by Shashwati Basak, who is the head quality of Emmanuel Therapeutics. We also have with us Praveen Gupta, who is the managing director of Premise Life Sciences. Just as a quick disclaimer, this knowledge broadcast session targets students and science professionals with an intent to increase the general awareness and the best practices while navigating one's career path. It does not aim to tell the students which career path is best suited for them, but hopes to facilitate and empower the students in making well-informed choices for themselves.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Am I audible?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, perfect. A very warm good afternoon and welcome to our second session on crafting your careers by India Bioscience. We are really happy to have you all, though again, like last time, I would say that we are missing the faces and the expressions, but I hope that you all would have a very fruitful session this afternoon. So with that, I would just say that last time when we had our first session, we spoke about India Bioscience, about science careers, about aligning your skills, interests, values while researching career options. But the very next question that comes is that how do you research career options and what are the various different steps one takes in order to find the right option? Though it's a very difficult thing, but still there are certain steps that one must keep in mind while going forward. So how do you do that? It's just like, if I can extrapolate, it's just like planning a very nice vacation, though I agree in the current times, again, not go for vacation, but it's like, let's say if you want to go to a really nice, beautiful, serene, calm place to relax yourself, to a beach, what do? Would you just randomly pick up a place and go, or you would spend some time researching, talking to friends, talking to people who have been to these different places and get that first-hand information? Exactly the same way, I guess one should go about when it comes to career. So what are the various different ways? I guess we are going to talk about three different paths one can take when one is researching career options: online research, informational interviews, internships, and volunteering. I'm sure all of us are familiar with online career research. There are various different portals, and with so much information at the tip, at basically click of a button, there's again no dearth of information that one can find that one is looking for. LinkedIn is a great place, and again, I guess I would urge all of you to be on LinkedIn if you're not, because that's where one builds professional networks and can find some relevant job opportunities as well. Then there are a lot of job portals. On India Bioscience portal as well, we put out on a routine basis various different kinds of job opportunities that exist in the Indian life science research ecosystem. So one can be on a lookout at all these different places. That's online research, but nothing better than actually talking to a person firsthand, talking to someone who's been part of that journey. And this conversation, this interaction with someone who's been part of that journey is nothing but informational interview or informational conversation, one can say. So this is, again, nothing but a direct, or a talk with a person who's directly or personally involved in something that you are interested in. There's a proverb that it's directly from horse's mouth, and the information that you get from this person who's been on that path is always most current, genuine, and most relevant. So as I just said, you would, by this conversation, get the latest and the most relevant information. And let me tell you, this is the best way to gather information about the field that you are interested in. You can talk about different careers, you can talk about the overall ecosystem of that particular industry or the path that you are looking for. You can also get information about the culture of that path for which you are seeking information. Now, the key point to remember while doing this informational interview is that you are not seeking information about any particular job opportunity or job opening, but what you're seeking to gain by this conversation is to understand more about the job profile, about anyone's a typical day, how this person spends a day, what this person does, what are the likes and dislikes, and things like that. And let me tell you, anyone whom you would approach for an informational interview would be more than happy to give you some time and talk about their individual paths or the profile that they are in. So you get more details about that particular career path by that interaction. Now, how one goes about it, and this is again very, very critical, because one cannot go in an unprofessional manner seeking an informational interview. So what are the steps involved? Very importantly, that you do your thorough research. You align your skills, interests, values, and the kind of opportunities that you are looking for. And based on that, you identify a set of people whom you want to talk to. Now, how do you identify? Again, your network comes handy. And let me tell you, I'm sure the speakers today are again going to emphasize on the fact that a network is key. So you identify people whom you want to interview. You prepare really well for the interview, because you should have a set of questions ready to ask this person in order to gain more information that I just mentioned about the career paths, about the roles and responsibilities, about the main deliverables, what are the challenges, what are the skill sets that are needed in order to be successful in this particular career path. Then you make a connect, and these steps all should be pretty formal, I would say, not informal. You go on, do an interview, and then build on that relationship from that point onwards. I guess I don't have time, nor I would want to go in details about each of these steps, because a lot of information is available on the internet, some amazingly beautifully written information as well. So my request would be that please do this, and you would see the result of doing informational interviews. So as I said, why are these, and how are these beneficial? You get really relevant information. You get information about careers that may not be even known to you. During this conversation, it might come out and you will find something new. And as always, insider tips are always very, very useful. This is the best way to understand the work culture of an organization, because you are talking to a person who's working in that organization, and no one can give you better information than that person himself or herself. And as I said, again, it's a great way to start a professional relationship. So with that, the informational interview part is over, and I would very quickly touch upon the third way in which one can research career options is internship. Again, this is very important. This is very, very useful to gain that experience, because experience is something that each employer looks for. Wherever you would go looking for a job, I guess anyone who comes with the experience is always on an edge. So how do you gain that experience? And the best way is to do an internship, which is nothing but a position of a student or a trainee in an organization. It can be with or without pay. There's a lot of discussion going on currently in India about streamlining internships. And this is basically directed at gaining experience or understanding more about that job opportunity, or even at times it's to fulfill the requirement of a degree. So I would say that one must look for internships while either pursuing your career degree or afterwards in order to seek more experience. Again, it gives you the real life practical experience, because the time spent in an organization would give you an understanding of the work culture, the experience, the requirements of that job opportunity. And in that process, you would basically understand yourself much better. You would get to know what are your likes and what are your dislikes. So it provides real life practical experience and that much needed exposure to the area of your interest. Provides a great opportunity to know yourself better. You might think that, okay, job X is something I would really, really enjoy. But when you go and sit, let's say in an office 9 to 5, you would think that, no, I need something different. It's only that real life practical experience which would help you take a lifelong discussion much better. So it basically helps your CV gain some weight, and sometimes it even helps you transition into a full-time role, because if you are doing something really good, if you perform really well, the organization might even absorb you. So with that, I would end my part, and with a request that this book, Disha, that India Bioscience launched earlier this year, which is a career resource book for life science and biotech students, is available for a free download. And this gives a really comprehensive overview of science careers, the skills that's needed, and the opportunities that exist. So please go download this book and make the best use of it.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes.
Sorry, a little bit of a technical issue there. Hi everyone, and thanks Lakshmi for the introduction. And so we are going to talk about building skills. And if you attended our last session, we spent some time during it talking about skills. Skills are basically a combination of innate talents and acquired abilities that all of us have. And an important first step during the whole career development process is to do a frank self-assessment to understand what is your unique skill set and how will you be able to apply this to whatever career path you choose. So let's suppose you have done this exercise and you have come up with a list of all the major skills you have that looks like this list on the left. Now, through this whole career research process that Smita and Lakshmi just described, you have found out that, let's say, your dream career path requires a certain set of skills, and that is this list on the right. So what you can immediately see is that you already have some of the skills, and that's great because this will give you an advantage when it comes to transitioning into this career. At the same time, there are some items on this list, some skills that you don't have. And this does not mean that you should despair or give up. This will happen with any career path. What this means is simply that you have identified what is called a skill gap. A gap that you need to fill, and that will be easy to do now that you are aware of it. One second. Okay. Now, okay, before we move on to filling skill gaps, skills can be divided into two main categories. First, there are technical skills, also known as hard skills. So let us say that you have learned a technique in the laboratory, or you're really good at coding, or you're good at a foreign language. So these are all technical skills. Your proficiency in these skills can be measured, and these form the foundation of your competence at your job. But there is also another set of skills that's just as important and that probably doesn't get talked about as often, and these are soft skills. Soft skills cannot be directly measured, unlike technical skills, but they make a big difference in how successful you are at your job and how well you navigate the whole job environment. And finally, both soft and hard skills can be transferable. This means that you can learn a certain set of skills in one job or one area, but you can apply them to many different contexts. So soft skills can be divided into two types. There are self-management skills, like how do you manage your time, managing projects, critical thinking, things like that. There are also people skills. What are your relationships with other people at your workplace like? So things like teamwork, collaboration, leadership, they come under people skills. And you need to be good at both of them. Also, you need to remember that this is not a clear-cut division. Sometimes the skills that you use to manage yourself would be the same skills that you'll apply when you're working with others, or vice versa. Okay, so coming to the crux of the matter, how do you learn skills? How do you build skills? For technical skills, you have several options. And many of these, the ones that I will talk about right now, can be extended into soft skills as well. Okay. Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, so you could, how do you pick up skills? You could go back to college, enroll in a degree or a certificate course. However, it's very possible that you may not have the time or the means to do this. So there are always online courses. So nowadays there are a lot of platforms. There's edX, Coursera, FutureLearn, LinkedIn Learning. So these platforms offer courses from all over the world, sometimes for free and sometimes at a very reasonable price. And you can make a note of this website, which basically ranks and reviews courses from a variety of platforms. There is also peer learning. So you could learn from your peers at your workplace, your college, university, institute. Chances are high that someone you know may have the skill that you want to gain, and you can learn from them. And perhaps they can learn something from you as well. And finally, as Smita mentioned, internships. And internships are also a good way of picking up specific skills that you may want for your career. A few things to keep in mind. Before you start on any learning path, set clear targets or learning outcomes. This will keep you motivated. And also research your options. Just like you would research career options, you research options for your learning paths as well. Particularly important for soft skills, learn to introspect and build honest self-awareness. This will be a very good starting point for your journey. And keep your mind open to experience. You never know where the next learning opportunity is coming from. So have as many experiences as you can. And finally, you only really learn a skill when you practice it in a real world context. So remember to always practice what you learn. So that's it about skill building for this session. And before we move on to the next section, we'll do a little poll to see if you have tried any of these in the modes of skill building in the past. So we'll give you about 30 seconds. There is one question on your screen. Okay. Okay, another 5 seconds and we'll stop this poll. Okay, I think we can stop the poll now. Okay, so at least 50% of you have taken online courses or MOOCs. That's really great to know. And many of you, almost 1/4, have also gone for internships, and 14% of you have taken additional courses at university or degree level. So that's really good to know. So this is a very skilled audience we have. So we'll move on to the next part. So back to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Shreya. And audiences, our apologies for some of the small technical glitches that we experienced. And let's move on to a little bit of question and answers. We've received some questions from the audiences. So I'll place it in front of you, Smita and Shreya. Anonymous attendee asks, in this period of lockdown, how do we gain hands-on skills required?
Okay, I guess pretty tough question. These are very unusual times, and I'm sure, though no answer would be correct for this particular question, I feel. The best is, gain as much knowledge as possible by reading, by doing online courses. I completely understand and agree that nothing can replace the hands-on experience that one gains. But as I said, with this unusual time has to pass by in order to gain experience. And I'm sure everyone's going to be sensitive about this period of lag.
Thank you, Smita. That's understandable. So Prapti Gaikwad asks, are MOOCs or online courses taken into consideration for jobs?
Yeah, so I would say that they're not like a replacement for a full-time qualification like a BSc, MSc, whatever, but they often demonstrate your interest in the job role you're applying to. For example, if you're applying to, let's say, a communication course and you show that you have taken courses in writing or communication, that shows that, demonstrates that this is something that you have previously thought about and paid close attention to. So I think that might play a role, at least in balance, moving the decision a little bit more in your favor.
Yeah, and if I can just add one more point here, that it's not just that you showcase the certificate that you got at the end of it, it's also the knowledge and your ability to understand and express or basically talk about that subject, which would matter either in an interview or in an informal conversation you're having with the person with whom you're looking to go forward. So one also needs to demonstrate a clear knowledge, understanding of that subject as well. So
I completely agree, yes. And if you have applied the skills you have learned during that course to a project and you can show that, nothing like it.
Exactly.
Thanks, both of you. Anonymous attendee asks, despite numerous courses, people hiring want experience and skills, but at the same time want the applicants to be at least holding an MTech or an MS. So how to balance these? I think skills as well, skills and experience.
Sorry, Lakshmi, I missed that question.
So, so despite numerous courses, people hiring want experience and skills. They want a minimal level of qualification like MTech or MS, and how to balance having skills and to acquire experience.
Shreya, you want to take that? Or
there is no substitute for experience, like when it comes to so that's where things like internships that Smita discussed, they play a very big role, because in addition to learning skills, they also show that you have experience in the area that you're looking for. And again, courses bring you knowledge, they give you certain skills, but it's in the application of those that is where you actually demonstrate your suitability to an employer. So I guess it's important to have both in your arsenal. So
if again I can add
substitute the others.
Right, and if I can add one more point, it's good it's important to have these with you, but also equally important is how well you showcase them. I'm not saying to sugarcoat it, but it's really important to showcase these skills, these experiences that you have and that are critical or important for the employer or the next opportunity that you are looking for. It plays a very, very key role there. So do pay attention to how you project yourself.
So we'll take last two questions. Prateek Chaudhary asks, how challenging is it for a postdoc with basic research background to get into a good industrial setup?
So I feel this question might be well put to our two guest speakers who are going to come up right after this. And
Yeah,
maybe we should revisit this once they have had their say.
Just 1 point. No, I completely agree. Both Praveen and Shashwati would be the best people to answer this question, because when you would listen to them, you would also understand the different mindset with which academia and industry work. So I don't think it's challenging. It's just that after listening to their talks, you would maybe find the answer to this question yourself, Prateek. So just hold on for this answer.
We'll take a moment to introduce our first guest for this afternoon, Shashwati Basak. Shashwati has a PhD in molecular and cell biology from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. She has a postdoc from Salk Institute of Biological Sciences, San Diego, and also Stanford School of Medicine. She worked as a research scientist in Veterans Affairs Medical Center in San Francisco on multiple projects involving translational research in cancer. She relocated to India in 2009 in Biocon Bristol Myers Squibb Research and Development Center, BBRC, and she's worked on early clinical and translational research department. She also worked in Origene Discovery Technology, and in 2017 as an associate research director and head of translational biology. She has managed regulatory paperwork and clinical samples logistics to handle global clinical trials sample shipment for Bristol Myers Squibb. She's currently the head of quality in a startup company called Emmanuel Therapeutics Limited, in an endeavor to bring affordable cell and gene therapies to Indian patient population. With that, over to you, Shashwati, to talk about your career journey in the industry.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for the kind introduction. And a very good afternoon to everyone here. Thanks also to Smita and Shreya, as well as you, Lakshmi, for this wonderful opportunity to interact with all the aspiring students, PhD students, postdocs, etc., who are attending this webinar and who are interested in pursuing a career in biological sciences. Just a quick check, I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a great platform created by India Bioscience, and I'm really delighted to be part of today. And I hope that my short talk will be useful to all those who are attending this webinar. So, just a little bit on the journey so far. So I've put up the India map here, just to point out that I lived in these many places during the course of my childhood, and as growing up, studied in different parts of the country, and how it helped me in applying the diversity that I came across in my day-to-day life here in the career jobs that I have right now. So having this exposure actually really helps, because you can connect to people very well who come from different parts of the country, sometimes different parts of the world, because as a global community, I think we all work in a very matrixed manner nowadays. So what does career mean to me? So I've put this in a question answer kind of a format so that people can also go through it. So it is about pursuing my passion for education, science, and also financial independence. And hopefully I'm being a role model to my daughters. The question mark, because maybe they will choose a completely different path than what I have, and that should be completely fine as long as they can look up to me as a role model in this. So that's just the hope here. Now, what were the key decisions that I had to make at each stage of my career? So growing up, I was interested in art, in dance, as well as in science, but then one had to make a choice. And the peer pressure, the pressure from parents that no, it is science which makes more sense. There could be a job opportunity which is a sure shot than going in arts versus dance. But things are changing very fast, and I think today's generation will appreciate that more. So anyway, I went ahead with science as my career choice. What were the circumstances that led me to make these decisions? Many things, because life is good, and on the other hand, it is also very interesting. So some of the choices that I had to make was based on family reasons. Some of them just because I'm in a geographical location wherein things are either available or not available. So, you choose accordingly. Sometimes it is difficult choice. Sometimes because after 12th, I did not get into MBBS entrance exam. So that's okay. Life moves on. So that was my first passion. But looking back, looks like I was cut out for this in the research field. And this is where I belong. So things happen for the best. So just try to make best of everything that you get. Next slide, Smita. Okay. So this is a little bit about my educational background. I did my bachelor's in microbiology from Ramnarayan Ruia College in Bombay. And in fact, this is what I would call complete serendipity, or maybe out of stupidity. I did not want zoology because it is all about animals. I did not want to study botany because it was all about plants. And not knowing what is microbiology, I thought it's a combination of everything in biological sciences. I opted for that. But then later on, it really revealed a wonderful world of microorganisms, which led to the rest of the things that fell in place. So serendipity also plays an important role. So I wouldn't say whatever happened was all planned. Sometimes it was just by accident. So while doing my bachelor's, I took advice from my professors there, and they mentioned that, MSc Masters in Biotechnology in those days is very good in MS University, Baroda. So although I had gotten through in JNU Life Sciences program, just because it is situated in Delhi, I was very skeptical about moving there. But as soon as I got in the biotechnology course, I happily joined this particular course in Baroda. So in fact, this is one of the courses in those days when this was catered to, inspire students to get into industry. Having said that, the ironical part was the head of the department himself told, no, don't join industry, go for research-oriented, career choice. So do a PhD first and then you can choose. It is still too early. So again, I listened to my professor and went and explored PhD choices in different parts of the country and settled down on IISc after several entrance exams, etc., to carry out my research work in molecular and cell biology, wherein I studied mechanisms of gene expression in prokaryotes, mainly looking at DNA-protein interactions. Having finished my PhD, I realized that, prokaryotes, it is good if you are in some kind of an infectious disease area wherein getting grants is easier. If not, just studying basic transcription activation mechanisms is not going to get you any grants if you are looking for an academic career. Hence, I thought I should, transition into an eukaryotic system, although still studying transcription activation mechanisms, but in a eukaryotic system, and also it happens to be a tumor suppressor protein called P53. Now cancer, and that introduced me to the world of basic cancer research. So I went to Salk Institute for Biological Sciences and did a short postdoctoral fellowship there studying P53 target genes and what is the mechanism behind it. From there on, I moved to Stanford University, wherein I got a fellowship from Susan G. Komen breast cancer postdoctoral fellowship, and continued to study P53 as a tumor suppressor protein and identified several novel targets of P53, dissected out the signaling pathway, how it works, thereby gaining a little bit more knowledge in the cancer signaling pathways. Next slide, please. So having finished my fellowship there, I happened to get a chance to work in the VA Medical Center in San Francisco. So as the name suggests, it is basically a hospital wherein there are several PIs who carry out basic research and try and translate that into something that can be useful in terms of treating patients. So that was my first entry point into translational research. And in the VA hospital, this research was in urological cancers. So, so basically from very, very basic sciences, a prokaryotic system to eukaryotic system, into the cancer, and then into translational research. Now, this short stint of just 1 year, in fact, at this hospital, helped me get my first job break after I relocated back to India, and which is where I joined BBRC, that is Biocon Bristol Myers Squibb Research and Development Center. Now, why in Bangalore? Again, because of family reasons. To get a job in the same place for both husband and wife, it is a little difficult, and Bangalore being the best place to do that. So anyways, I joined there as a senior lead investigator and head of clinical genomics. So maybe many of you would be wondering, whatever I did, what has that got to do with this now? Now, it many times happens that one or two particular techniques that you pick up during your postdoc or during your PhD, you can actually apply that and make that as your career choice in the industry. So quantitative PCR was something that was coming up in those days, and that is what actually helped me in setting up the clinical biomarkers lab, which focused on the technology platform of quantitative PCR, which is what I did in BBRC. So from there on, I moved on to join Origin Discovery Technologies, which is again a company within Bangalore. And I was the head of translational biology. Now, again, back to some questions. What were the steps that helped me reach where I am today? Essentially, the constant urge to, learn more. So if somebody gets satisfied with what they are doing, then the whole process stops right there. So one has to constantly think about learning new things. In fact, that is what helps you grow in your career. And when did you realize you made the right choice, alignment of skills, interest, values, etc.? As I mentioned, a lot of it was accidental, serendipity, sometimes conscious choice, but right or wrong, whatever it is, basically try to do my best. Next slide. Okay, so after Origin, so essentially Origin, I had to do a lot of commuting between two cities, Bangalore and Hyderabad. So I got a little tired after a while and I took a break. So, so here is an example that I did take a break and I had thought that I will retire. So people take breaks all the time. It's a myth that if you take a break, you cannot get back, but that's not true. There are several reasons that one can take a break for. In my case, it was to just relax, gain perspective, to spend time with my family, cultivate a diverse mindset. So I like to travel. So I traveled a lot during that time, strengthened new skills. So in fact, I started doing online teaching to the high school kids from all over the world. And then I found that actually I can teach very well and inspire really, really young minds. People and students who want to pursue careers in biology, not just to get marks, but this was something I really, really enjoyed during that short stint. And of course, try new career options, so this is when the break came that I jumped into a startup company with a new role that I had never done before. So I joined Immunil Therapeutics. So Immunil, so immune system. So immune comes from the immune system that everybody has, and Neil is for indigo. So hence the name Immunil. It is founded by Kiran Majumdar-Shaw and two other co-founders. And this particular company is into cell and gene therapies, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. But I joined in as the head of quality, which has two functions, quality assurance and quality control. And quality assurance is something that I have never done, but I took up this challenge, and as even today I'm learning to set the systems in place. So now a little bit brief overview of the field. So since the career has been in drug discovery research, this is for the benefit of the audience. I just want to highlight that it is, the drug discovery and development process is conducted throughout both academia and industry, which forms a very nice ecosystem and includes a variety of companies, businesses, and academic institutions. This can offer a number of options to those looking to move into the field. So if you are keen to focus on the early aspects of drug discovery, for example, studying the molecular mechanisms of disease development and progression and validating new drug targets, then an academic career could suit you. On the other hand, outside, you can also consider a career in industry if you would like to work on identifying novel drug candidates against validated targets and then testing them to find out whether they could form the basis of a new treatment. However, in addition to what most people think of as traditional large pharmaceutical companies and classic academic institutes, there's been a rise in smaller biotechs, which are typically funded by venture capital, contract research organizations, abbreviated as CROs, contract manufacturing organizations, which is abbreviated as CMOs, and not-for-profit government-funded research institutions. So all of which are playing increasing roles in drug discovery and are offering even more career options to choose from. Now, regardless of the career path you choose to follow, being a part of the drug discovery community can provide you with multiple opportunities to learn new skills and create new connections with fellow scientists. So I think one of the questions from the audience was, I have a postdoctoral fellowship in basic research, and how can I get entrance into the industry? So here is an example where in the early discovery phase of the pipeline, you can actually get into some kind of an R&D lab where you can put your skills and your knowledge that you have gained from your academic experience into use right away. Smita, next slides, please. Okay, so this slide lists down some of the job profiles that are suitable during different during the different part of the drug discovery and development pipeline. And if one is interested, these are the different profiles that are mentioned here with the qualifications that are usually looked for. But please keep in mind, it is not the degree that matters so much, it is the experience. Now, early in the drug discovery pipeline, wherein you are looking for R&D kind of work, there, even if you are a fresher, it is okay because you get multiple chances to, go through your work and get yourself trained. But the more you move towards the later in the development and more towards the approval of the drug, you would notice that the kind of expertise that you require or the experience that you require would become more and more stringent. So, so anyone with MSc or PhD in biological sciences can apply for these posts, if you are interested in drug discovery and development kind of an industry. Next slide, please. Yeah. So a few common disciplines from which the students who get their degrees from can apply. And again, you have to look for the job profile, what kind of degree they are asking for, what kind of educational background they're asking for, and accordingly you can apply. The slides I think will be available, and this list, the reference is given here. So things like electrophysiology. I'm just giving this as an example. It's a very, very niche area, and anybody with this kind of an experience can get a job in any of the drug discovery industry, because this particular skill set is pretty limited in our country. So this is just an example to give. Next slide, please. Okay, what are the different skills required in the field? I think Shreya, Smita, and Lakshmi gave a very nice overview of what kind of skills are required, and probably India Bioscience website has even more. But just to reiterate few of them, of course, very good scientific knowledge. You need to be a subject matter expert in what you are choosing to apply for. So that is a given thing. Over and above that, of course, hands-on lab training. So if you are aiming for a job profile which requires you to work at bench, do experiments, hands-on lab training is very important. The rest of it are very good to have in your skill sets, like analytical thinking and problem solving. Essentially, people look for those candidates who can do their own problem solving and not run to their bosses every single time if there is a problem. So we like people who have this kind of a skill set. People management and soft skill. Again, Shreya mentioned about this. It is very important because here we are no longer a single PhD student who is only worried about your thesis. Of course, during PhD and postdoc, you do teamwork in terms of collaborative effort, and that actually counts because people management and soft skill is something that is really, really handy. Ownership of the project. So again, when we are doing our PhD, we think this is my thesis. So we really do it carefully. But in industry, although it is a job, someone who can take ownership of that project is nothing like it. So we prefer candidates like that. And then time management, I will come to it again in a later slide, why time management is important. And no one can undermine the, the advantages of networking. If you know people in industry, networking, not just with the mindset of getting a job, but if you are interested in an industry career, networking is the way to go. Now, what are the different portals? I know I was noticing a lot of questions on today's COVID pandemic situation wherein people are not able to get hands-on training. But please look for internships in companies which are really not closed down in this situation. They are still open because these are manufacturing facilities, so they really can't shut down the shop. Like Biocon has very good internship opportunities, Dr. Reddy's has, and I'm sure there are many other companies if you just go to Google and search it up. Resources like webinars, published articles, trainings in academic lab helps. So master students who are looking to get hands-on training in some specific technology platform can apply to labs, and many times they are entertained in the academic labs. And of course, the master's dissertation, try to pick a subject which is of interest in the industry. Next slide. So little bit on the future of this particular field. So this slide actually is, although it is futuristic, if you look at it, but in the day-to-day life of drug discovery pipeline, one can actually use artificial intelligence. Now, people who have got degrees in bioinformatics it can be of very great advantage to them, and because it helps in every aspect of drug discovery. So what is artificial intelligence, right? So it is in very short sentences, it is basically which refers to the ability of a machine or a computer to perform tasks in response to a range of environments. Now, these machines mimic the cognitive functions that are usually associated with human capabilities, such as learning and problem solving. So one thing to keep in mind is that the development of a new drug is very complex, very expensive, and a long process, which typically costs billions of US dollars and takes on an average anywhere from 12 years onwards. So it's a very lengthy process. Okay, now decreasing the cost and speed up the drug discovery is very challenging and is a very urgent question in industry, which is where AI comes into picture. So anyone with data analytics as a side skill would be very helpful. Anyone with bioinformatics, not just a lab scientist, So these really help. So reason I put this up is because this is the future in the drug discovery and drug development field. You can always read up more on this. This is just a very short talk, so I can't get into the details of it more than what is shown here. Next slide, please. Okay. This is another way or another direction in which the field is moving into, personalized medicine. Now, this particular slide is focusing on on the top part, you can see that how the current medicine works. You have a crocin tablet, any kind of fever, you take crocin. So we call it as one treatment fits all. So now, depending on why you got the fever, it may be efficacious. Few people will get cured of that fever. And if the underlying cause is not known, you give that crocin, maybe it will bring the fever down for some time, but then it will come up again because you have really not treated. So either it will have no effect or it will not act at all. So this one treatment fits all kind of a situation this paradigm is now shifting to more of a focused, personalized medicine. So that's the future of medicine, especially so in cancer treatment. Again, I'm focusing on cancer because that's the field that I'm working in. In cancer treatment, if you take breast cancer, for example, one particular treatment may not benefit every single person who is having that cancer, because maybe the stage is different, the extent to which the cancer has spread is different. So nowadays, because of personalized diagnostics, so patient sample is taken, it is analyzed using different technology platforms. So having knowledge in those technology platforms also helps, like genomics, metabolomics, transcriptomics, etc., etc. So using those, you can actually find out markers and make it very, very personalized. Yes, Smita, I will finish it off now. And then make it very, very personalized. Now, talking about personalized medicine, the other area in which I'm working on currently is called cell and gene therapy. Here, you would collect cells from the patient or a donor, modify those cells, expand it, and then infuse it back into the patient. Now, in allogenic, basically the donor is one and the patient which benefits are a lot. In autologous, the patient sample is put back into the patient. Okay, so how does this help? Essentially, in a cancer scenario, the T cells, which are the immune cells, are modified to give them power to fight that cancer, and then it is put back into the patient to fight that cancer. And it's very applicable to hematological cancer. So that's the area wherein my current role is. And this part, which is highlighted here, CMC analytics and batch release, as a quality person, this is what I look after. Next slide. Okay, this is the website of the company, Immunil Therapeutics, and my role here, as I mentioned, is for quality control and quality assurance, and to ensure that the product that comes out is of correct specifications. So living drugs are made, unlike the small molecules which are non-living. Next slide. What's the present job role? Of course, ensuring the quality of the product and compliance to the process and the data. The others are people management, supporting overall business strategy, engaging in cross-functional team interactions, participating in scientific discussions, etc. So this is how typical day looks like for me. And some things that I like is, of course, the science part of it, and knowing one day that the patients will benefit from this work. So that's basically the goal. Things that are not so desirable is the timeline pressure to deliver. In academic, things are little flexible, not so much, but then in industry it is a lot. And one of the actually key challenges is hiring skilled and talented people. So, while people are asking how to get a job, here we are struggling to actually hire skilled and talented people. So that's something to keep in mind. Lessons learned: dream big, be grounded, and take action towards your dream. Each day provides a new opportunity to learn things. Every experience counts. So just remember that it's a journey that is the exciting part. The persistent ethics and integrity is not to be compromised ever. That's something that we look for in every single candidate. And last but not the least, I would say, be healthy and be happy in these COVID times. Thank you.
Thank you, Shashwati. Thank you, Shashwati, for sharing your rich and varied experience. Let me see. So we have next join us another very wonderful industry leader, Praveen Kumar Gupta. He's a very inspirational leader, in fact, a very wonderful person, and whom we all know. He's the managing director of Premise Life Sciences Private Limited. And Premise is a young and a dynamic organization that aims to bring cutting-edge life science technologies for breakthrough research and clinical diagnostics in India. Praveen completed his master's in genetics from Pune University, found his calling in sales and marketing with a management degree from XLRI in Jamshedpur. His stints at Ranbaxy, Dr. Reddy's Lab, Life Technologies, Biorad, and DSS have all been instrumental in his journey in setting up his own company, Premise Life Sciences. And with a rich experience of over 2 decades and diverse fields in biotechnology, he has carved a niche for himself as an industry leader. Praveen, we've been waiting for you to talk.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Thank you so much. And Shashwati, a great talk. It was really inspiring to hear you. Thank you so much. Hey, friends, changing tracks. I'll give you a very different perspective of, how industry is. And I've specifically mentioned in my introduction that I'm a genomics evangelist and an unsolicited mentoring. So I have this huge urge of mentoring people. So if anyone of you feel a need to basically take any kind of advice or a feedback, feel free to come over. This is just a little background about the company which I work for. I work for this company called Primas. We have two verticals called Primas Biotech and Primas Life Sciences. I'm the CEO of Primas Life Sciences. Primas Biotech is essentially a contract research and contract manufacturing company. Primas Life Sciences is essentially a distribution company wherein we bring in technologies, some of the game-changing technologies in India. And I think one of the primary claim to fame for us has been a company called Illumina, which is leaders in genomics. Some of the accolades on the path we've actually garnered. We got some press. I'll skip this. This is just to show you a slide about how growth happens. In 2006 to 2009, when I started Primas, that car was my office actually. So I used to operate from that car. And today we have a decent office, where we have about 65 people working in this Primas Life Sciences and about 140 people working in Primas Biotech. This has been my career timeline, essentially speaking. I completed my master's in genetics way back in 1992 from Pune University. Shifted gears. I was one of those, I would say non-conformist at those times. Most of my batchmates took a PhD and postdocs. Maybe I was actually not good at that, so I chose a career of sales, and I joined that time one of the leading companies called Ranbaxy in sales, and this was in diagnostic arena. And for about next 5 years, I pursued the diagnostic path or diagnostic sales path in various roles, working for Dr. Reddy's and Ranbaxy. And then came a very pivotal point where I shifted in 1997 towards an industry called life sciences. Essentially, life sciences is what caters the research domain. And I changed my gears and joined a company called Life Technologies, which is now a part of Thermo, taken over there. And then I joined this company called Biorad and worked there for about 5 years. And this is where I got my induction to what I call as my calling, called genomics, where I've made my little career path in that area. In that period between Biorad and say about next couple of years, I also did my MBA from Accelerite. And I think this is also one of the major stepping stones for me to understand, while I was in the business space for a long time, but I think the MBA gave me a complete holistic view of how a business process is run. And to me, I think somewhere, if you ask me, that also was instrumental in me kind of taking up the entrepreneurial route after that. And if you see precisely after that, I actually took the to the route of starting up Primas, incepting Primas. I was a co-founder of Primas with my other partners. And it's been a 15-year journey. I mean, I've really enjoyed this path for the last 15 years. What does career mean to me? I think different people have different, explanation to them. For me, I think it's basically choosing a path that I'm very passionate about, and thereby where I can actually actualize my potential by creating an ecosystem of experts, mentors, mentees, leading to a creation of value, which can be a legacy to inspire others. I mean, to me, somebody asked me in one of the other interviews that what's the role of an entrepreneur? And I think my simple explanation is the role of an entrepreneur is to create more entrepreneurs, is to inspire people to basically make sure that, more and more people take up entrepreneurship. And for that, I think at each stage I've made my own choices. Right at the start of the career, it was very, very important what kind of company do I work for. Now, I just like Shashwati, who's had a background traveling across the country. I'm a Fauji kid, defense background. My dad was in Air Force. So I also traveled and done my education in different parts of the country. And that helped me to connect to people more easily compared to maybe some of the people who could not. And I think at the start of my career, I chose sales because I think probably, I wouldn't say I had the gift of gab, but I think I had the networking abilities. And then, as you move on, of course, some are chances which happen. Some are basically depending upon the need of the market. And sometimes, you basically look at products, technologies, value systems, your own potential interest at that particular time, and what kind of role do you handle. And those are, defining choices for your career paths. What are the major decisions I have taken, which has basically been influential? As I said, I think I already alluded. Shifting from diagnostic industry to life sciences was a major pivotal point. I got to know a lot of things about life sciences. Shifting sometimes, like for example, in my career, for the first, I think about 12 to 13 years, I'd worked for very large conglomerates. And nothing wrong in that. But then I worked for a small company, a relatively small company. And believe me, in this small company, I got a chance to basically handle a role in which there was a lot of responsibilities on my head. And I think that catalyzed my growth or catalyzed my learning and gave me a confidence that actually I can put off starting my own business. And I think that's where my entrepreneurial, ambition or the bug, as they say, bit me, and I think I incepted Primas from there. And as they say, most of my choices were also a function of finding my mojo, luck, serendipity, as Shashwati alluded, interest, following my passion, finding the gaps that existed. And sometimes, like for example, in Primas, I tried to find the gaps which were existing. And how do I basically fulfill those gaps with quality solutions? So those were, kind of ways you decide about your path and choices. Like genomics is one accidental area. When I was working for Bio-Rad, they acquired a company which was into microarrays, and that gave me my induction into genomic space. And I've not looked back. I've followed this path, and I think one of the most pivotal things for Primas' success was to partner with Illumina, which is again a leading genomics brand. And we've now Primas is known as a company which basically brings in some of the most cutting edge technologies in the area of genomics, whether it's single cell genomics, whether it's epigenetic studies, so we really kind of, offer some of the cutting edge solutions there. What's my current role? Of course, being a CEO, I look after the entire plethora of activities, but things which I'm really actually important for us, which are more pivotal for me is, of course, I have to uphold the Primas culture and values. I have to, of course, hit the revenue goals and generating shareholders value. I need to basically engage with KOLs, key opinion leaders and partners. I have to build up Primas brand per se, and constantly look at redefining what our future strategies would be. Because sometimes you may be actually secure today, but then tomorrow is extremely uncertain, and COVID has actually taught you a lot that how just one fine morning, we've been hit by a bug, which is such a small, which is just 30 kb of genome, has completely disrupted the whole human life, so that's the way it is. And what does my typical workday involves? Of course, a lot of processes I review with my team leaders, a lot of engagement with my team, handle, of course, a deluge of emails, which I think most of the professionals have to, strategize on some of the key projects, firefighting, key customer engagements, and read a lot of articles and papers to basically upskill myself. This is a typical workday, which I go through. What do I like and dislike? Of course, I love interacting with people. So any opportunity for me to interact with people, inspire them, unlock their own potential, discuss about future paths, I love. What I dislike, I am one of those, extremely disorganized person per se. So I hate bureaucratic processes. Anything to be processed, I'm one of the worst guys in the company actually. So my expense sheets will be the last ones to be filed up. My daily reports will be the last ones to be filed up. So I'm pretty bad at that. What are some of the learnings and lessons, I've actually gone through? So I think if you ask me in the business part, of course, Shashwati also said this, and I think to me, this is most important, is importance of networking. I think to me, our education does not lay a lot of emphasis on this part, but I think networking is one of the most important cornerstone for a professional's growth. So very early on, my humble request to all of you would be, please be on LinkedIn, please be on social media sites and try and increase your network. Reach out to people, even in this lockdown period. Many of you are asking that how do you learn a skill set? I think networking with people, talking to them about, it could be even about experimental planning, not just about soft skills. You can actually discuss a lot with people and learn. So actually, please proactively look at networking. Have the ability to think 4 or 5 steps ahead. This is a trait which has really helped me shape my career. As a business owner, I have to be responsible for cash flow. Sometimes, as they say, most entrepreneurs are only bothered about profits, but I think very importantly, cash flow is what runs the company. So to me, that's very important. Last is eat the frog. As I say, the most difficult issue, we tend to obviously, procrastinate and we say, okay, we'll do it later. Try and learn to actually deal with your biggest problems the first thing in the morning, and I think that will really help you. As a leader, I think, I strongly believe that try and hire a team which can challenge you, because you will only grow when you have a team which is challenging you constantly and challenging the status quo. It's an art to delegate. Many people who are hands-on workers don't feel like delegating the work responsibility to others. I think I've learned the hard way that, I delegate my work, the company's responsibilities to people. Balancing EQ and IQ. Most PhD students, only focus on IQ sometimes, but I think balancing the EQ and IQ part is a very, very important aspect. Try and hire for potential and not just for skills and experience. It's an art again to judge somebody on the interview to see what kind of potential that candidate holds for the future. That's very, very important. Now, the industry which I serve is basically a genomics industry, which is catering to practically a lot of areas, whether it's reproductive health, oncology, population, genomics, research, complex diseases, consumer genomics, agriculture, genetic health, biobanking, a lot of areas. I think right now Shashwati is talking about personalized medicine. That is something which is again, a real field which has been adopted right now, big time in terms of looking at one size fits all approaches going. Some of the other trends which are probably not being discussed is things like people are trying to develop blockchains in genomics. People are coming out and making direct-to-consumer genomics companies, single-cell genomics, integration of multi-omics and phenomics data. I can give you an example. There's a imaging lab, which is basically MRI and PET scan lab, which has taken a genomics tool to integrate a data for a cancer patient, how to integrate a PET scan data and a genomics data coming out from a NGS experiment to see a better patient management to be done. And that we are seeing a lot of trend out there. AI-based tools, a lot of AI-based tools are coming in the area of genomics too, and of course, personalized medicine. Just to give you again another example, look at IBM Watson. It's a tool which is for AI-based tool for healthcare. Philips has come out with a complete health suite for genomics-based applications. Google has a genomics arm. Amazon has a cloud service for genomics data. I'm sure this is there on the web that people are talking about genomics-led economy right now. So in next 3 or 4 years' time, we're talking about a 4-fold increase in the genomics market to become a $62 billion market. So I think being this, to me, I feel this is my calling. And this is one area which I think has a lot of potential in the times to come. If some of you decide to actually transition to industry, I think to me, these are some of the important areas which you should be actually dwelling upon. Developing your leadership skills, increasing your commercial awareness, improving your interpersonal skills and networking skills, and having an industry knowledge. At this point, it's important to know what is happening in the industry, what are the current trends which are happening, what kind of companies which are existing, what kind of leadership is existing out there, what kind of plans do they have. This kind of knowledge will always help you to transition in the industry. And if you decide to choose to transit into industry, to me, I think what kind of traits would you look at in a company? I would say what kind of products do they have? What kind of people and culture do they have? What kind of history they have? What kind of focus do they are they showing right now in terms of their vision and the growth plans? These are some of the things that you should look at when you're actually choosing a company. Again, many people have asked this question that what kind of changes? To me, I'm not saying that research, when you're doing your PhDs and postdoc, it's individualistic. But to me, I think industry is more about collaborative work, teamwork. So I think a mindset has to be changed towards teamwork. And again, I mean, a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I'm sure there are a lot of articles on the Google, and for the paucity of time here, I'm not dwelling onto this. But my small request to all of you is, there's a book by Stephen Covey called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I've listed that actually here. Please read this book. It'll really benefit all of you in terms of developing the skills very early on. Some of you asked, what kind of, when I'm on the other side of basically table and hiring people, what do I look for? So one of the things which all of you are looking at is skill and knowledge. Please also try and hone your attitude. These are 3 things which people look at: attitude, skills, and knowledge. Ask principle. So many a times we look at attitude because skills and knowledge can be taught, attitude cannot be. So it's very difficult to basically change the attitude. So please rework, look at the kind of attitude requirement for that particular job and be ready for that kind of thing. And to me, again, real employability comes from two aspects: the human capital, which is your set of skills and knowledge which you come up with. And second is the social capital, which is your networking abilities and your entire network which you have. Please do not compromise on that. Most people I've seen in the field of science compromise on the social capital part. Please, guys, please focus on that part. So what are some of the skill sets which are needed in 2020? I'll just skip through this, but I think just realize that as per the surveys right now, they're saying complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management are some of the key pivotal skills for a professional to succeed in 2020. So kindly look at honing the skills. So, I mean, we believe genomics is going to have a major explosion, and there'll be a lot of new jobs that will be created in the market. And what kind of jobs do they exist in the genomics industry in which I'm operating at? If you look at currently, I would say majorly broadly, we have application support, so for which you require masters and higher. So we have in our company about 14 application scientists. Almost about 10 of them are PhDs and postdocs from good places, and some of them are masters. Then we require bioinformatics support guys, because there's so much of data which is getting generated right now. So you need to analyze the data. So for that, you require bioinformatics support guys. You require technical sales and marketing. Many of you who've done your PhDs and postdocs shy away choosing a career of sales and marketing because historically our PIs have taught us to look down upon a sales guy. My humble request is, guys, I work for Illumina, as a partner. There are many Nobel laureates in the company which are basically taking up a role of marketing a concept. So sales is nothing but a transfer of confidence, which you have on your belief system. If you can transfer it to somebody else, that's what sales is all about. So if you have the skills to basically communicate effectively and a passion, do not shy away choosing a career of sales and marketing. We have many people who are PhDs from ISC, IGIBs, who have chosen this path of sales and marketing, and they're doing fantastically well in the company. Field engineering support, which is mainly a technical support, repairing the machines. So for that, we require a BTech in engineering side. We have content writing people. This could be graduates and above. Tech analysts. This could be masters and MBAs. Regulatory aspects for looking at the regulatory approvals from the government. I was giving an example. This is some of my team members. So we have people from ISC. We have people from IHVT Palampur. We have people from IMTech. We have people from ISV, from MBAs, from ISVs. So a very eclectic mix of talent which we have, which are working on a scientific field right now. To me, these are the industries which will come to party with genomics. If you look at the kind of scope which exists, these are clinical labs in hospitals, food testing labs, pharma R&D, CROs, educational institutes, direct-to-consumer space, soil testing labs, diagnostic companies, imaging labs. there's a whole range of companies which are adopting genomics. So this is an area which I believe there's a lot of potential which is there for next 6 to 10 years. And I strongly believe that post-COVID scenario, there'll be a massive boom in the molecular diagnostic space. Already, if you see in India for last 27 years, the adoption of molecular diagnostics was very, very slow. Just to give you an example, there are 50,000 path labs in the country, and only about 200 of them adopted molecular diagnostics before COVID. The COVID hits us. Today, we have more than 1,400 labs which are offering RT-PCR tests for COVID alone. So to me, I think molecular diagnostics is going to be a major upswing. So all those who have pursued, and molecular biology is a very basic skill which you require. So all of you have a great scope tomorrow in path labs, hospitals, to basically try out those skills to be in the lab. There's a major spurt of right now in terms of Make in India movement, Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's a clarion call given by our Prime Minister, and that is causing a lot of spurt in manufacturing in India right now. Because till now we were lacking good quality solutions for even basic things like PCR reagents or real-time PCR boxes or gel docs or various other molecular biology tools. Now I'm seeing a lot of spurt in terms of people adopting and trying to manufacture this in India. There are a lot of biopharma companies which are trying to develop vaccines for COVID and other things. So that will be again a growth area there. And of course, data surveillance. Looking at what are the changes which the virus is adopting at this structure. So there'll be a lot of changes there. Now, this is my favorite slide. This is my small crystal ball gazing of 2025, a genomics perspective, purely a genomics perspective. I believe that 15% of the world population will be sequenced, which is almost about 900 million people. That's almost the population of India. Almost 80% of the population of India by 2025. Imagine 90 crore people being sequenced, which means about 40 exabytes of data will be generated, which is almost 3 to 5% of the total data which will be generated that time. Imagine banking, imagine Netflix, imagine YouTube, imagine genomics contributing almost 5% of the data. So that means that if you have a deluge like that coming up, there'll be a lot of scope for bioinformaticians to basically play a role there. There'll be a massive number of NGS, which is next generation sequencing users. Global market will be a massive surge in terms of genomics. And I believe healthcare could be the next IT for India. So like the way I think there's a lot of healthcare tourism which is happening right now in India. And I think post-COVID, I strongly believe India will play a very, very important role in terms of bringing in a lot of healthcare tourism too. Thank you, guys. There's a famous quote by Steve Jobs: "Stay hungry, stay foolish." Please be very curious in your life, and I would like to thank India Biosciences and all of you. Great platform, Smita and team. It's great to share my perspective, and I would love to come back and answer any questions. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Praveen, for not only sharing all the positive insights about the industry, but also essential life skills. With that, I won't stand in between the attendees and panelists. I'm going to open the floor for live Q&A, but I will just take a minute to just tell you how it works. So it's streamlined. When you want to ask a question, just raise your virtual hands. I see a lot of hands raised, and I will unmute you, and when you see a message that host is unmuted, it can allow you to unmute and talk. Unmute and ask your question. Please keep your questions brief and to the point. I will be reading out your names. So skip the introduction part, go straight to the question so that we'll give as many people to interact. Once you've asked your question, please mute yourself. Priyanka, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Priyanka? Sandeep, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sandeep is muted.
Shravanti, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? So, Sandeep, yes, go ahead.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Ma'am, can a webinar certificate or a online course certificate be valuable in any kind of government jobs? If so, then how much it will be important for us?
I'm afraid the question was not very clear. Maybe Lakshmi, if he can type it, unless others gathered it.
Yeah, Smita, his question, was basically that does the online courses give him any leeway in the government jobs?
Honestly speaking, government jobs have some very stringent criteria. Not online courses per se might not give you adequate points because you would definitely require some basic qualifications. So one has to look for what role one is applying for, and based on that one can ascertain. But government jobs mostly require a very strict degree from an institution rather than online courses.
Priyanka, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Melchias, I hope I got your name right. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Okay, so in the meantime, Shreya, can we take some questions from the Q&A box, please?
Sure, Lakshmi. So a lot of people seem to have questions about the qualifications or experience necessary for the entry point. So Tista wants to know if having a PhD is necessary. Kriti wants to know if it's too early to join after MSc. Shrija wants to know whether postdoctoral experience is necessary. So I guess we can combine these questions to ask, does the entry point at when you enter industry, whether it's after MSc, PhD or postdoc, does it matter in your career that point on? So Praveen or Shashwati, if you'd like to take this.
Yes. I would say that it doesn't matter so much. It would be based on your choice. So if you want to get into an industry very fast, the best possible way would be to do it soon after PhD. And if after MSc somebody is considering maybe because of family reasons or whatever other reasons you have, that's also perfectly fine. Only thing to keep in mind in India is that if you want to grow up in the career ladder, sometimes that becomes a little bit limiting. Not always though, but sometimes.
I mean,
Praveen, you want to add?
yeah, surely, and I think Shashwati is spot on this. I mean, I'll just add one more thing that I think in the industry, ultimately, what matters is what kind of output can you give tomorrow, you know? And I think for that, what kind of knowledge and skill sets you pursue or you carry are more important sometimes than the degree. I've come across lots of master's degree holders who have a fantastic skill set for that particular job. And I sometimes prefer those people for them. For example, knowledge is not a custodian of a degree. You know, you don't have to be a PhD or a postdoc to actually sometimes demonstrate knowledge. Of course, I mean, so if you, there are specific jobs require in a lot of specific experience of a particular domain. If your PhD is in that area, it does give you a lot of brownie points. But mainly people look at what knowledge and skills you have.
Thank you, Praveen. We'll take one more question from the QA box. An anonymous attendee is asking, what's the scope for industrial PhDs in India? Are there like Indian industries that offer a PhD in life sciences? And if yes, how does one approach?
Yeah, so at least I'm aware of now there are CSR has started ACSR, Academy of CSR, wherein they allow you to have PhDs from joint PhDs from industry also, so you can actually continue working with the industry too. So I think there are a lot of companies which are ready to offer that kind of partnership with academia, and there are some government programs which are there too.
Right. So just to add to what Praveen mentioned, even during the 1990s when I was doing my PhD, even at that time, industry candidates could actually enroll for PhD. In my own lab, in my own PhD lab, there was a person who also is a entrepreneur and owns Bangalore Genie as the owner of the company, who was a co-registrant from Bangalore Genie in those days and IISc. So just an example. Yes, it is possible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. We have a question from Vandita that while doing a PhD, technical skills get enhanced, but soft skills are not very well taken care of. So how does one actually work on them and get industry-ready soft skills?
Right. So I think, see, even during PhD, you give presentations, lab presentations, data presentations, journal clubs, even your PhD thesis defense. So you just have to put in a little bit of extra effort to make sure that what you're doing during your PhD days, you just extrapolate it to an industry presentation. But you get ample opportunities during your PhD as well to hone on your soft skills.
And add to that, further, suppose, for example, we are talking about certain soft skills can be developed while we are networking, while we are interacting with professionals, or we can do maybe an internship on a virtual basis. And these are great times right now to do maybe a virtual internship to hone your soft skills with the industry. Have a mentor in the industry, maybe who can guide you. You can actually speak your mind, you can bounce your ideas, you can get to have an idea from them that what are the things which are needed, and specifically try and work around these things. That's the way I think you can really sharpen the skills.
Okay. Thank you, Praveen. We have a question from an anonymous attendee for both of you, and that is, how difficult was the transition from academics to industry for the two of you, and how hard did you have to try for getting the opportunities that you did? So it's a pretty broad question, but if either of you would like to comment.
I could. So once I relocated, it is little hard if you're outside India and you're trying for a job here in the industry. Most of them, I don't know if things have changed in the last 11 years or not, but they don't bother, answering, except a very few MNCs. So it's best that you come back and then you look for a job. And again, networking is what helps. I reached out to my network from IISc days, and then they passed on the CV, and then things happened. So it's not very hard. Just be on the lookout and keep networking is what I would say.
We have a question about hiring and presentation, that when you are applying to an industry, how do you communicate that you have the specific skills that the employer is looking for?
I'll take that. So I think, firstly, it's very important that it is contextual. So sometimes what happens, I've seen certain people having a very generic kind of a pitch for every kind of a job. So we're talking about personalized medicine, guys. I think it's also about personalized approach, horses for the courses. So if a job requires a particular skill set, try and modify your pitch or try and modify your CVs accordingly so that your key traits which are required for that positions are highlighted. And catching attention is always a challenging thing. How do you basically, whether you need to make them in bold, or best thing is, as I say, there's something called elevator pitch concept, that if you are meeting somebody in an elevator, you've got 30 seconds when the elevator is taking from the ground floor to the certain floor. How do you impress somebody that somebody gives you maybe an hour to go and discuss this further? So same way, a CV, a mail or a SMS or a WhatsApp is your elevator pitch. How do you catch the interest? And that's very, very important.
Thank you, Praveen. We will also be discussing CVs, cover letters and elevator pitches in a future session in this series, so stay tuned. I think we can take a few more live questions now. So back to you, Lakshmi.
Thanks, Shreya. Arindam Sarkar, you have your hands raised. So if you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. My question is specifically to Dr. Shashwati. I just wanted to ask, how different was your career growth in terms of pay, incentives, etc., following your transition from being a researcher in academia to being a quality assurance and quality control manager in a startup company? So was it any different, or were there more opportunities in industry when compared to academia? Thank you.
Right. So again, as I mentioned in my talk, a lot of it was situational. So once I moved back to India, my kids were really small at that time, and I was in no shape to apply for an academic position and write grants to support the lab and the students, etc. So it was a conscious decision. In fact, all my mentors were pretty surprised that I took up an industry job instead of going into academics, because they always thought that I was a person cut out for academics. So it was basically family driven, because I was not up for taking up a very demanding academic career at that point, wherein I could handle both grant writing, setting up my new lab, as well as handle my family responsibilities. So that was the decision-making point in my life.
Were there any changes in terms of pay and incentives when you switched from academia to industry, considering the fact that you now work in a startup company?
So, okay, let me answer it first, academic versus industry, and then in industry, a well-established company or a large company versus a startup. Okay, so normally industry would probably pay you better than academics, but nowadays, maybe Smita is more aware of this. I don't know the government scale of pay for professors in the country, but that's also pretty good nowadays, is what I hear, but I'm not aware of the pay scale. Now, if you're asking me, compared to a very well-established company like what Biocon would pay versus what this startup company is paying, yes, there is going to be a difference. So you have to make a choice what suits your passion. I joined the startup. In fact, I had kind of retired last year, but I saw this opportunity in a startup wherein CAR T cell therapy, the first of its own kind in India, is going to be established. And I will be one of those pioneers who is going to play a big role in setting up this company. So although the pay may not be at par with the industry range, but then I took that risk because I can, and hence I jumped in. So it is up to the individual to decide. Now it has its advantages that, on the other hand, I would get to see the very first patient who gets treated. It's a cure. It's not just a therapy wherein the relapse rates are very high. So really keeping fingers crossed at Immunil that it's going to benefit the patients drastically and will change the entire scenario here in India. So that's a choice you have to make. You always are given a choice. So you make a conscious choice. At a given time point in your life, what is the choice that you would make? As I mentioned, right or wrong, just try your best. That's all we can do, I guess.
Thanks, Shashwati. Maybe we will just take, in the interest of time, we've gone a little over a couple of questions. Please, attendees, keep your questions to just one so that we can have as many people ask. Muhammad Arshad had his hands raised, but I don't see you anymore. Priyanka, you've had your hands raised for quite a long time. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Shravanti, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Else we will take a question from the Q&A box.
Yeah, definitely, ma'am. Good evening. Hello.
Yeah, Shravanti, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Generally, I want to know whether switching from academy to start a bio-pharma company, what are the needed that we do actually require? Skills. Hello, ma'am.
Yes, I heard your question. So I think both me and Praveen, as well as India Bioscience team, mentioned a lot of skills, that will be useful for you to incorporate when you're looking for an industry job. So focus on your CV or resume, how you develop your soft skills, how you prepare for the interview, what are your core skill areas that you can kind of sell to the interview panel. So you may be really skilled, but then you have to present yourself, tell a story which will convince them, be honest as to what you're looking for in your job profile. So I think I'll just leave it at that, because there's a tons that one can talk about it.
So maybe we'll wrap up with one question from the Q&A box. Shreya?
Sure. Okay, an anonymous attendee is asking, how can we keep up with the changing trends and upcoming events in industry? Where can we get the correct information?
Well, the company websites. So look for all the companies and go through their websites. You will notice the change in trends. What kind of technology platforms are they using? Which kind of therapeutic area they're looking into? What other fields they are working on? And then accordingly, you can read up and educate yourself further.
Thank you, Shashwati. We have a lot of questions in the QA box, but I'm afraid we won't have time to answer them all today. So handing back to you, Lakshmi, and we will keep these questions and we will see if we can get back to you afterwards on these.
Thank you, Shreya, and thank you so much, panelists. We'll wrap up the session today, and we would love to hear your feedback, and also using the feedback form that we will share with you on your chat window, bit.ly/CYC2-feedback. Please let us know any other questions that you may have or feedback for this session. And we will have another Crafting Your Career series soon, which we will announce, and that would be on many of the different things that you have asked today, which is CV, resume, elevator pitches. How do you present yourself? How do you package yourself? And I'm sure that you all found this extremely useful. Once again, our apologies for small technical glitches that we experienced here and there. And stay connected, stay informed, stay safe during these times. And see you soon on another session on Crafting Your Career in Science. Goodbye from us at India Bioscience and the speakers, Shashwati and Praveen.